innovación como herramientas de progreso, reafirmando nuestro propósito de conectar.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Estaremos próximos a iniciar el panel. Quiero recordarle de igual manera a los asistentes que pueden acceder a un servicio de traducción. En la parte posterior podrán encontrar estos dispositivos con el fin de que puedan entender el panel de la manera ideal. De esta manera damos inicio al panel Improbable Monster Codev Best Practices, y este panel estará a cargo de Luis Auclair de Rocket Ride Games, Carlos Sánchez y Mark Sobonic de Probably Monsters. Bueno, Luis René Auclair, él es CEO de Rocket Ride Games, cuenta con más de 20 años de experiencia en la industria de los videojuegos. Luis está aplicando las lecciones claves de su trabajo en estudio, desarrollo y publicación para dirigir Rocket Ride Games. Esta es una agencia de videojuegos con 16 expertos en videojuegos que trabajan en todo el mundo, con 65 estudios en muchos aspectos de la creación de juegos, desde la presentación hasta la producción, publicación e inversión de estos. Asimismo, también nos acompaña Carlos Sánchez. Él es el General Manager de Probably Monsters. Él es líder experimentado con más de 20 años de experiencia. Ocupó roles claves en estudios como Riot Games, Turn 10, Bungie, Microsoft y también EA. Ha dirigido equipos grandes, ha expandido la base de jugadores de fuerza de 10 millones a más de 24 millones. En Riot mejoró la madurez operativa en los procesos y eficiencia de costos, y es reconocido por entregar importantes lanzamientos, impulsar la innovación y fomentar una cultura de trabajo positiva. Es un respetado líder en la industria y para nosotros es un placer contar con su participación en la tarde de hoy. Asimismo, también nos acompaña Mark Sobonic. Él es VP of Partner Alliances de Probably Monsters. Él es un veterano ejecutivo de la industria de los videojuegos y de la tecnología. Es conocido por desempeñar roles claves en Intel, Microsoft y Sega a lo largo de múltiples generaciones de innovación tecnológica. Ha trabajado en casi todas las categorías de los videojuegos, desde la producción hasta el desarrollo empresarial, el control de calidad y el marketing. En el día de hoy, estos tres expertos se encuentran con nosotros en este panel, así que démosles la bienvenida con un fuerte aplauso.
Thank you very much. We understood everything, I promise. Everyone, thank you for showing up. The goal of this panel is to discuss Codev, right? What we want is to give you interest in building a studio as a co-developer with big video game studios. There are video game studios all over the world looking for help with different studios in different regions. So I think this is a good panel for studios here, studio heads, or people wanting to create a studio to learn how to partner with great studios like Probably Monsters. So we started with a great introduction, so we're not going to reintroduce ourselves. That would be super weird. However, Probably Monsters is not well known yet because your games haven't shipped. So I'd like you guys to do an intro on Probably Monsters. Tell us about your values, the studios within Probably Monsters, and what kind of games you want to build for the future.
Sure. I'll take that. So can you all hear me okay? Yeah? All right. So Probably Monsters was founded by Harold Ryan. He was previously the CEO and chairman of Bungie. And he left Bungie with an idea of finding a way to start a new company with one main goal, and that goal was to change the culture and the way we make games. So our pillars as a company are unite, guide, and empower. And what our goal is to help teams find the best path to market for their game. And one of those ways that we found is coming back to Codev and external development. I'll get back to that in a second. Our mission as a company, again, is guiding, empowering, and uniting teams We have multiple projects that are being considered. We are thinking of more than one game as a company. And our goal right now is, after raising a considerable amount of money in 2021, to get those projects underway, find the right partners like people like yourselves here, and build a culture that changes the way games are made. And it sounds like, you know, a high ambition and a lot of words. It's a lot of work. And so now our company is putting that into work. We have some pillars, we have some goals, and we have staffed up to bring in a lot of people that have a mission of making great games. One of the things that we're taking in our approach is not just having the same approach to development. So we will eventually have teams that are making games in-house or hybrid, which means some aspect of working remote, but most of the time in-house. We'll have teams that are going to be fully remote, and then we're going to have teams that are really focused on co-development as a partner. And the reason of that is costs are going really high in the West Coast, but we also believe that if we can get a core group of people that can then partner with the right partners outside, we can help the industry as a whole. We can maintain the employment of our employees so we don't have to scale up and then let people go when things aren't going great, or after a game has shipped and you don't need that same level of staff. And so that led us to, you know, why are we here? It's to find the right partners for those that want to do that co-dev style of development. But every team at Probably Monsters will have some aspect of external development and co-development. The reasons being is cost and making sure that we have employee bases that are sustainable.
Well said.
And that's awesome, guys. Also, please prepare some questions for the end. This goal is to be having a conversation together, so hopefully you will have questions. If we speak too fast in English, please let us know. We're going to try to slow it down. Let's talk a bit about the evolution of codev, right? So the evolution of the games industry has been accelerated in the past 40 years. It's an industry that moves super fast. So codev didn't start the way it is today. You guys have been around the block for a couple of years. Tell us a bit about how you saw the evolution of codev, when you started using it, why were you using it back then, to give a bit of perspective to the studios here to see where this could be going.
Yeah, so I first started using co-development, gosh, I think it was probably 13 years ago or so on Madden NFL, which is obviously a very big sports franchise in the United States. At the time, I was in charge of the franchise mode, or the career simulation mode for Madden. And we could not staff enough people within not just our team, but even in our studio in Orlando, Florida, to develop this game. And so due to like the constraints of office space, we were looking at how do we leverage external partners to potentially contribute to Madden. And for me, what we did was isolate areas of our feature in order to be able to export that, or export it externally and find the right partners to do that. So we focused on a lot of engineering tasks, UI art, UI development specifically, and spread that across 2 or 3 companies. Our biggest partner at the time was HB Studios out of Nova Scotia in Canada. They contributed a lot to that year, to that Madden in that year, Madden 2012, Madden 2013. I know that they're a partner still, I believe, to this day. But that was my first foray into co-development, and then realizing how amazing that journey was in ramping up a partner, having them feel like a true collaborator and partner in our process. My goal with HB Studios and our other partners at the time, or Madden, was to make them feel like they were a part of the team. And so they had virtually attended our stand-ups at the time. We would fly to go meet with them and visit with them, meet the engineers and artists, et cetera, that were working on our game, usually like 3 or 4 times a year, just from a social aspect, not we're checking up on you, right? Because we already knew what they were doing day in and day out by them collaborating so closely with us. So that was an amazing experience, and for me, there was no way to go back from that. And so the rest of my game dev career to date has been focused on leaning heavier and heavier into that space as a result.
Back then, did you have specific selection criteria, right? There were not as many studios, so sometimes it's like whatever studio can do UI, but did you have specific criteria to select your teams?
Yeah, for us we did. So we created a vetting process back in that day that I still use to this day. Evolve it obviously, but once we realize what we actually need in terms of how we are going to compartmentalize our development approach so that we can isolate things that a partner can work on, then we go and vet the partner for the specialization in those areas, right? And then once we find the partners that are really good at that, which was hard at the time, very hard at the time, then if they didn't necessarily meet the bar but came close enough, we felt that we could augment that by helping them raise their level of competency by working with us. So that was like our approach then. It's evolved a lot now because there's so many, partners available. There's a lot more to choose from, but back then you had to dive very deep with a partner to really understand what their capabilities were. So.
Yeah, I guess deep human investment within a partner is very important, and people thinking that co-dev is something that you can just start doing and you're going to get contract and you're never going to see these guys again, or maybe at GDC. That's not how co-dev works. So planning those really tight relationships and growing together and being transparent of what you can and cannot do at that stage is super important.
Yeah, I would add to that our approach at company level wise is to start a relationship with as many developers and co-developers and partners as we can. We're going to be making multiple projects over our existence as a company, and we want to have a relationship that extends beyond a project basis, that really is a probably monsters relationship. Then that gives you access as teams discover they need something. We have that relationship. We know what your capacity is. We know what you're capable of. We grow with you. That gives an opportunity for ongoing conversations. There's probably a likelihood that companies or partners will come into Probably Monsters, build a relationship and not find an immediate fit with one of our teams, but that relationship will leave the door open for future projects where we can work together.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. So co-dev has evolved quite a bit. We're making games, the way we make games has evolved absolutely as well in the past 20, 15 years. What do you see that evolution, like how did you live that evolution? How did you see it move forward through game development? Did you see it follow the same path as AAA development and regular development, or did you see more specialization of co-dev partners? Did you feel anything different from regular game development studios?
All right. I would say for me, and I've only ever worked in AAA, so it's my background or my approach to this is probably very different from others. From a AAA standpoint, the industry has become so highly, so highly specialized in the teams that we build internally that it's impossible to find all the talent that you need. And when you look at the actual partnership or outsourcing XDev marketplace that's out there today around the globe, what I've noticed over the years is that I think companies have realized that the thing that I felt as a AAA developer, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to double down on being great at this and maybe that, and not necessarily being capable of like delivering a multidisciplinary project over the long haul. And that has actually worked out great in a lot of cases because there's a lot of potential partners out there with really deep specialization of things that are hard to hire for. On the flip side though, like the evolution that I think we're still going through, and one that I know that I'm very passionate about, is finding those unique partners that can do an entire game, like from the beginning to the end, across all disciplines and specializations. That's much harder because then at that point you're in essence staffing for a game studio entirely, for a game project entirely. And so, but I think that is the next big evolution that'll happen because as Mark alluded to previously, it's very expensive to develop, AAA, even AA level games I would say in the United States as a whole. It doesn't matter that it's the West Coast. And so finding partners who can deliver most of a team that you could even potentially like work with to help level up, right, over a period of time and become a really close, tight-knit partnership where they're really just an extension of you. That is the next big leap that I think we're heading toward. So.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think when I started Rocket Ride, people would come to me and say, do you have studios we can work with in South America or in Ukraine, in Southeast Asia, like different locations around the world? And the main thing they would say, like, can you find me like cheap studios to work with? And I think this is no longer the first criteria. I think it helps, but I think most importantly is the fit and the ability to deliver on that game promise. I think people overestimate the cost aspect and underestimate the experience, the speed, and the ability to work together. Oftentimes you're going to be in this relationship for 3, 4, 5 years, even some forever, right? People, because it ends up in an M&A situation. So I think it's important that people understand that cost is not the ultimate winner here.
If I could jump in there for a moment. So like, I've spoken to so many game dev colleagues, former colleagues about this over the years, and at the end of the day, like cost is not even a factor anymore because it doesn't matter who you work with anywhere in the world, it's going to be cheaper than where you're at today in the West Coast of the US. So no one even really cares about cost. They care about like, what's the quality of the work that they're capable of doing, what's their availability, how much training do we have to do, how good, like how much of a language barrier might there be, et cetera. Like there's so many other factors involved. Cost is not one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Let's switch gears a bit and focus on Probably Monsters. You said something at the beginning, Mark, that really baffles me, right? You're working on 3, 4, 5 games at the same time. You raised money. You've done this before as a company, not as a company, but as individuals. So as a company, it makes sense. You mentioned it, but I want to hit on that nail a bit more. How heavy are you going to rely on co-dev, and how is the structure going to work on Probably Monsters and in studios, and how does this flow within the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a model where we're going to have GMs like Carlos that have a lot of autonomy around their projects. They're going to decide to some degree what the team size is going to be, and that fits into a development framework that we have that's pretty much standardized across Probably Monsters, which has stage gates for how many heads and how many based on a milestone, right? So we have a development framework that ensures that each stage you get to unlocks more headcount, more dollars for you to continue on the project, so that we're not committing too many resources and dollars to projects before they're at the right stage. Each of those, early on, I mean, when Carlos started his team, he sat down with the CEO, and we don't start with a game concept, which is kind of foreign to a lot of people. Typically, people start with, here's my concept, I want to get that approved. We actually start with leadership team. And then once that leadership team is in place, they have an idea, do they have the people they need to make the game? And what is it going to take to make that game? And typically, we work with that team to cap a size that's going to be the internal size for that team. We have shifted more and more in that direction as we look at the way we're going as a company, and as the industry is moving, not just because of cost, but also I want to double down on the need to build teams that we can sustain. Right, that's really important to us. There's a cycle in the industry where people staff up, they ship, and they lay a lot of people off, and we are trying to avoid that as well. So coming back to Unite, Guide, and Empower, making a better place for people to make games, we want people to be able to thrive. We don't want a lot of layoffs. They're inevitable, they've happened. So that pushes us more and more into a co-dev external development model. But each team will have some degree of autonomy on setting a cap for that team size. That's also dependent on the type of game that they're making, right? So there's a variety of projects, a variety of leaders, a variety of genres that all dictate a different style of development. Every single thing we do at Probably Monsters will have a component of external or co-development. And some will have a majority. Some will have 6 to 10 people internally, and the rest is co-dev.
Wow, that could be a big team on co-dev. Carlos, I think this one is more for you because you run a studio within Probably Monsters, and you know, in the past, a lot of horror stories that you hear from co-dev is about the relationship between the studio and the creator, right? The IP owner, IP creator. And most of the time, it's a setup issue, right? Either the producers are not matching, the creatives are not matching, or there's redundancy or lack of redundancy. How are you setting up your team specifically within Probably Monster to attack those points and make sure that when you start your co-dev, you are well equipped and you are providing also the support to the team you're going to work with?
That's a great question. And I'll preface it with saying that my approach to my setup, my game, is very different from other teams at Probably Monsters or even most people that I know in the industry and how they've developed big games more recently. So for context purposes, my goal is to build really a very small leadership team internally that can develop a game, develop a concept, and work with a partner to develop a game 100% externally. And so what that means, and this is kind of answering your question as best as I can, what that really means is that the partner that we end up selecting and moving forward with, that partner is really our team. Like, we have to treat them as if they are in Probably Monsters, they're a part of us, because with that model, that's the only way that you're going to end up being very successful. And so that ends up meaning that, like, we have to have the right people on our end, yes, that can, like, make sure that we develop what the vision is going to be and that we can clearly communicate it to our partner. But then the actual collaborative process of executing on that vision, it would be the normal collaborative process you would expect if that partner was internal, right? If it wasn't an external partner, if they were just part of your team internal. And so that's my approach that I want for my next project, and an approach, I would say an approach that I've kind of taken in the past too, just not to the extreme end of 100% going external. So very much looking forward to it. I think it's going to be very successful. I've done portions of it before at other studios like Turn 10 when I was the executive producer for Forza Horizon, but those were more big compartmentalized chunks and not like necessarily the entire thing. So, but I know that it'll work well as long as I build the right team internally, we have the right vision, and then we have the right partner.
So would you say that your goal is to have less partners that are more focused rather than multiple partners being specialized in multiple things?
Yes, exactly. So my desire, which I know is almost an impossibility at times, is to have a partner who could deliver 100% of the project, right? That's very hard to find. You always have to augment something or supplement something. And so my more realistic goal is that my core development partner can execute on, like, say, 70% or more of the project, and then we supplement that with other external partners that we work closely with that specialize in whatever our core development partner is lacking in.
That's really interesting. Mark, what about the other teams within Probably Monster? I don't know if you had time to talk with them internally, philosophically, about their approach, but do you have studios internally that are going to approach it slightly differently?
Yeah, everybody's going to have a slightly different need and a slightly different approach. Again, back to GMs with autonomy and different teams and different types of games. So they all have a bit of freedom to what they're going to do. Some will go with the, hey, I need somebody externally that can just do this one discipline, and I'm going to hire a bunch of individuals, and that's how I'm going to augment my team. Others are looking at how can I find the right partner that can do 70 to 100% of it. The other thing that we've done, just like hygiene-wise for process, is anytime we onboard any partner, we're really hardcore about involving IT up front to make sure that that working relationship is established. We understand what they need. They can get to work day one. We put a lot of thought into optimizing and tweaking that process. Every time we encounter anything that we can make slightly better, we want to make it so that, you know, somebody can feel like they're a part of the company as much as possible.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Let's move to LATAM, South America, Colombia. Have you guys ever worked with studios in the region? I mean, it's been growing quite drastically in the past 10 years. What's your experience or what's your key interest if you haven't worked with a studio in LATAM yet, what's your key interest to come here, meet these studios, and potentially work with them?
I'll answer this one. So for the first question, have I ever worked with a studio in LATAM? The answer is no, not from a game dev standpoint. When we were in production of Forza Horizon 5, which if any of you have played it, that game is set in Mexico, right? So we worked with a lot of local artists, musicians, advertising agencies, et cetera, to like try to make the game from an atmosphere standpoint feel very authentic to the region that it's in. That is the extent. Now, to answer the other question, my longtime desire for 10 years now at least has been to work very closely with Latin American development partners to build double and primarily AAA level games in this region. That's just not really something that happens a lot here. There's a definite lack of opportunity, and over the years, I've had so many colleagues that are from, South America, Central America, who had to leave home to find opportunity at those levels of game development. And my desire has always been to like partner with somebody to make games big enough where people have the opportunity to not leave, the region that they're from to go seek opportunities elsewhere. So that is why I'm here to. I finally have the opportunity at probably Monsters to, potentially execute on that vision. I didn't have that opportunity at the other companies I've worked at, and so I'm very excited about that and leapt at the opportunity to come down here and start meeting with studios this week.
Cool, that's really good. I think one of the key points when you're doing co-development and partnerships like this, people need to align on their abilities, their goals, their objectives, right? And it's always very scary for the studio that wants to work with you guys, fall in love with the project, fall in love with probably Monsters, and they're afraid they're gonna fail. They hide a little bit of things under the rug. How are you gonna approach this so that they don't have to be afraid to say, I'm not the best at this, but I can be the best at that, and if you give me that amount of time, I can learn this. So what's your length of onboarding process? How are you planning this to make sure that the partner can feel safe to work with you, but at the same time that you can get the resources you need?
Yeah, I can add to.
Okay. That's a great question. And so my simplest answer to it at the end of the day is that the way that I view the partnership that I'm going to have with whatever studio it may end up being is an actual long-term partnership or even investment, if you will. Because I'm not looking to build one giant live service game that goes on forever. I'm looking to do different things over a decade plus. And so, with that, there will be a lot of opportunities. And so I'm looking for a partner who's just as invested in being a really long-term partner for us as we are with them. And I think when we're aligned on that and they can feel that, because I will do my best and my team will do my best to make them feel that way, then concerns about hiding things or ramp up time, et cetera, doesn't matter anymore. Because I will definitely have a very senior leadership team to help folks level up. If I can be candid for a moment, there was a gentleman I was speaking to outside, I won't say who it was, and he brought some of those concerns, like, well, I think like our team might not be like completely senior enough for something like that, but like we could get there with help, and that's like that was my expectation coming in, to be honest with you. I'm not looking for a partner who's ready to execute on a AAA game tomorrow, because I know that probably doesn't exist. That's the reality of it. And so I'm more interested in partners that can grow with us over the next decade.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. We approach partnerships outside of CoDev and XDev just generally as a company with looking for people that want to grow with us. And that helps us get a deeper partnership. When somebody shows up and says, I'm an expert at X, Y, Z, just give me the money and I'll go away, sure, that may be useful for us, but that's really not what we're looking for. We're looking for people that want to be true partners for long-term with Probably Monsters. And it's okay to say, I'm not great at this, but I'm good at this, and with your help, I can get here, because that gives us an opportunity to get that deeper bond, that deeper partnership, and grow together.
Yeah, I think transparency and communication is critical. And I gave you that context when we had our call before the show. In the past, when publishers, developers came here and dangled the carrot of co-development on AAA, a lot of them were here with more of an exploitative approach, whereas, hey, we're going to not pay a lot of money, we're going to promise you rev share, and then they run away. They don't treat the studios right. So there's a once bitten, twice shy approach sometimes, and it's difficult for a studio to be open, kimono, and transparent when they got that treatment in the past. I think the level of sophistication of Probably Monster, but overall of the industry, both in LATAM, Colombia, but also worldwide, is helping people be a bit more open with that. Show of hands, people. Can you raise your hand if you run a studio or work in a studio that would like or wants to do co-development in the next 2 to 3 years? Just so I can see who's here for that. Cool, that's a good group of people. Transparency is a key point that we just discussed. What would be your key advice to studios saying, I want to grow my studio in that direction? How would you help them grow there?
Yeah, I would say, you know, if we're going to stick with transparency as a theme, is being like the example Carlos gave. When an opportunity is presented to you, there's no need to pretend that you're any more than what you are. That credibility, that authenticity actually comes across to those of us in this seat when we're meeting with a lot of people, and it carries a lot of weight. It may not seem like it does, but it does, and it does specifically with us as a company, because we want to work, again, with people that want to grow with us. And if I can tell that someone's being honest with me and authentic and has a true desire to partner, that gives me more incentive on the business side to partner with you, because there's already a bit of trust, there's already a bit of credibility established. You know, as far as understanding the trends in the market, that's a real hard thing for me to give advice on, because it's constantly changing. As we talked about, it's constantly evolving, and Probably Monsters has so many different opportunities that I think, at least for engaging with us, it's be your true self, be honest about what your goals are and where you want to go as a company, and then hopefully we can find a way to partner together and help each other grow.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think the only thing that I would add to that is, you know, for me personally, and this is both for external teams and internal teams, I've worked on a lot of very complex, massive budget AAA games, and so I've seen all the good that there is and a lot of the bad that there is in game development. And so when people approach me with honesty and transparency on things that are going well, things that are not, or in the case of like even evaluating a partner, what they're really good at, what they're not, where their gaps are, et cetera. I know when it's authentic and I know when it's not, because I've seen a lot of inauthenticity over the years. And I really value and respect when, you know, people are very transparent and honest with me about the state of projects, tasks, their studio, et cetera. Because what I want to do at the end of the day is I want to help. That's, you know, I'm always one that wants to help, wants to try to fix things if possible, et cetera. And so if there's an opportunity for me to help in any way, then I'm going to do that. But I can't do that if like honest and open communication isn't happening. So.
Yeah, totally makes sense. On the future of, let's talk about the future. It's like you said it, Mark, it's extremely difficult, right? I want to leave the next question for the AI component. But for this one, like, how do you see the evolution moving forward of co-development? So you guys have been in big AAA. You've been in the industry for a long time. The big AAA studios, the Microsoft and the EA and all that, they don't use the codev necessarily the same way. Do you have an opinion or a view of what the future of codev can hold for these studios and how it can impact their region, their studio, and where it can grow in the world? What are your thoughts on this?
Give me a second here. So I think codev is consistently going to evolve. I do think that we're going to have a situation where developers are constantly looking at, okay, to make the type of game I want to make it at that cost, it's untenable to staff it all internally, right? I think we're getting to that point consistently. So then what do? We look for partners externally to make this LATAM region a spot that shines. Would be really like to continue what you're doing and continue growing your skill set, continuing finding partnerships that allow you to grow. Like we represent one opportunity of that, but there's plenty of opportunities out there. I think the future is, we talked about it a lot in the beginning of my career, that why don't we do things like Hollywood? You know, Hollywood has expertise and lots of different skill sets, and you hire those people for a project, they do that project, and they move on. And there's pros and cons to that. That would be ideal if you're, to Carlos' point, making one game, right? But if you want an ongoing relationship, then you're going to want partners that can actually be there for a long term and not just show up for 3 months, 6 months, do their job and leave. I think the future shows that we're going to probably have a bit of both, right? I think that you're going to have the studios that, and the codev partners or external development partners that just mature to the best at X, the best at Y, and people will consistently go to them for that piece of work because they've established that there's credibility, there's trust, and there's some predictability in what they're going to be able to deliver. And then there's others that are going to go fully dive into that Hollywood model. We're starting to see bits of that show up because, you know, basically people are looking for a solution to make the product they want to make when costs are continuing to escalate. They're going to find solutions like this. So I think, you know, you're going to see two sides of that coin. Individuals that become really specialized, companies that become really specialized, and then a bit of this Hollywood model where if I know I'm going to go make a game, how much of a core team do I need? And then how much can I just go hire the experts that have established themselves in that? And that is how most film production is done today. There's lots of lessons to be learned from that. And I think we're starting as an industry to say, okay, we're open to that idea.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add to that is, I guess I don't know where it ends up going, but I'll tell you what I would like to see. We have a massive problem with game development today, that we make games a lot of times that are way too big, as a result, way too expensive, and we produce more content that the typical player is going to consume or even wants to consume. And that leads to a lot of bloat and costs. And as I mentioned earlier, it's super expensive to make games in the US as it is, so you can't have large teams. We wouldn't have the problem of needing extra large teams if we just cut down and focused on what actually mattered in our games. Now, what does that have to do with co-development and opportunity? I think that there's a lot of opportunity for co-development in places like Latin America and Africa, as well as another region that I look at. There's not enough, I think education all around in all the varieties of game development that all the various disciplines that you could need. And then two, the other thing is like opportunity in terms of not just partners providing, you know, external development opportunities for those companies, potential companies, but also to investment, and not investment in the form of come be part of our conglomerate, but no, investment in like, oh, you have a great game idea, let's invest in that and become partners in that. So I know that that's not necessarily co-development wise, but what I'm trying to get at is my desire for the industry is that we create smaller, more focused games and spread the investment further around the globe so that we get more diversity of a portfolio of games around the world, which then provides a lot more opportunity for employment in the games industry in regions, especially today, where it's lacking. So.
Yeah, very insightful. Show of hands again. I'm going to make you participate a bit more. Who is dabbling in AI? Who is looking at AI for programming, art, design? Who has tried to look at it? Okay, yeah. What do you guys see AI's place It's a very controversial question, so we could talk an hour about it, but let's try to keep it short. And what are your thoughts on some AI introduction into development of games and co-development?
I have a bit of a soapbox speech on this, so I'm going to try and go short and keep it tight since we have about 9 minutes left. Gen AI has created a lot of controversy. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of concern. There's a lot of fear. First, if you're an artist out there, tons of empathy, and I understand where the fear and concern come from. If you're an engineer and you think, hey, this is going to take my job, tons of empathy, and I understand the concern. At the same time, the history that I've watched and paid attention to in my 30-year career in games, and just looking back all the way back to the printing press, new tools are very threatening and scary all the time. They very rarely displace an entire segment. Now, I'm not saying that jobs won't be wiped out by Gen AI. I think that's probably likely, but new jobs will be created also. And so I view it as a really powerful new tool that can potentially save time and money. I don't see a world right now where humans aren't involved in that, right? I don't think that I personally want to play a game that's just made by AI. And why? There's soul and heart in art. That's a human thing. That's not an AI thing. So this tool can help a human make something great. Awesome, right? Saving time and money, that's something that is of interest to people and with my type of title and job. It's just inherent, right? We're running a business, you want to make the maximum profit, but we also want to make really great product, right? We want to make product that's going to delight our consumers and make everybody that plays our product happy. Gen AI is just, in my opinion, another tool in that set that will allow me to achieve that goal.
From a game maker point of view, I have a love-hate relationship with AI right now. I can see where it's very helpful, especially very early, before you even start development, when you're concepting on a game. It helps alleviate the need for some specific individual talent, but that's just to get the concept done. Realistically, though, at least for now, and maybe for the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see how rapidly it progresses. I would not lean into that space too much, even for the type of games that I want to make, because just to what Mark said, there's a heart and soul behind games. I mean, at the end of the day, games is a crossroads between art and tech, right? I like the art side more, but and I don't think an AI, at least for now, is going to actually be able to replicate that from an actual art standpoint, a narrative standpoint, design standpoint. And so, I don't know, I'll reevaluate where I stand on it in 5 to 10 years, but for right now, it's not something that I'm looking to like invest a lot in.
The only other thing I'll say on it just real quickly is that at a company level, we can't ignore it, right? That's our view from Probably Monsters, is we can't ignore it. We're not necessarily going to embrace it. We want to get as smart as possible about it right now. And that's, if you said, what's your advice? I'd say pay attention to regulation, pay attention to the laws, and learn as much about it as you possibly can.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, guys. So I'd like to move on to questions right away. We do have our little translators, so we can take questions in Spanish, of course. So please, if you have any questions, comments, anything, we'd love to answer them.
Hello. Thank you so much for the interesting panel. You've talked a lot about how transparency is essential when you're doing codev, right? So I was wondering if you have any anecdotes of a time in which a partner was not being transparent during the development process and you found out too late. And if so, how was this handled?
We have so many.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of how I can word this without outing anybody. So, yes. So, the way that I typically work with partners, as I mentioned, it's very close, right? Like they're an extension or part of my team. And so we don't typically find out things when it's too late. But the last instance where this happened, it was probably about 3-4 years ago for me, where we were working very closely with a partner on an expansion. I'm gonna be very careful what we're saying. And yeah, what they were delivering to us looked like what we wanted, but behind the scenes, if you tear the covers off of it, there was no way we could ship what they had developed, right? It would have not performed to spec, right? And so luckily it wasn't too far down the path, but it was before our next big milestone check-in with them that we realized that they were not being completely truthful with their overall progress. They were faking it a little bit. And that happens. But for me and my team, the way we handled it at the time was just simply like, we flew over there. I won't say where they were from, but we flew over there and we just met with the team, and not just with the leadership team, but we met with the whole team. And we typically did these trips like 3-4 times a year anyway, but this was in between there, in between one of those times. And we met with the team and got a real sense of not just where they were at, but why they were there. And what we realized was that it was our fault that they were where they were. And so we made the course correction on our end, and then made the course correction from a schedule standpoint to make sure that they were set up on a path of success. So.
And I think this is really important. Transparency goes both ways. If you run a studio and the partner that hired you is not transparent or using the classic terms, can you do these extra features and this extra scope? I promise you in May, when we pass green light, we're going to get you rev share. These are huge red flags. So transparency goes both ways. So most of the times the problems are caused because somebody's not sure that if he's getting the right information, so he starts hiding some, and then it escalates. So I think calling this out, like doing a trip, going there, evaluating and figuring out, I think is the right way to do it. You need to find the right tone to communicate that, but I think that's the right approach. Please, other questions? The beautiful gentleman in the back. Well, you're both beautiful.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for your time and for your talk. It was very interesting. I have a question kind of aligned with the previous one. It's with regards to your culture-centric ideals. And my question would be, what are the challenges that you have faced on co-developing and still instilling this culture? Yeah, I'm curious about it.
It's a great question, and it's actually done more upfront than trying to solve on the back end, right? So part of that discovering of the right partner is we talk a lot about our culture, and we like to ask questions about their culture, and we want to learn about their approach, and we seek partners that have a similar vision and culture and desire to treat employees the same way.
Has there been any quantifiable approach to this? For example, a party, or I don't know, like a sports activity or something like that.
I wish I could say yes, there's a quantifiable, like a way to measure it, but right now I haven't found that. It's a bit of gut, to be honest with you. It's a bit of the feeling, but it's not just mine. Luckily, I have partners in the company where we're going out, we're talking to these individuals, and we come back and we talk about what we felt in those meetings and in those conversations. And one of the aspects that we do focus on is culture, right? It's not, to Lee's point earlier, it's not just cost. We're not looking for the cheapest person. It's not just skill set. It's deeper. It's how are we going to be able to work together, right? And that usually is on the list for people when they're evaluating partnership, but then we add that, where do we align on culture?
All right, yeah.
I could add something to this too. So when I've gone and vetted partners in the past, and it's the same at Probably Monsters, the main question that I look to answer for myself, and I look for all of my leadership team to be able to answer as well, is do we feel that this company, studio, whatever, aligns with my team's values, and would we be excited to work with them every day? And if the answer is yes, I know it's not quantifiable outside of like a small democratic vote. If the answer is yes, then we want to move forward with that partner. And then what we do from then on really is like embracing that partner and bringing them all into our space. So ramping them up, onboarding them on our company's culture, on our team's culture, and of course then on our game, right? So that way they feel like they're really like just part of the overall culture we have, and we could be part of the culture that they have. So.
Amazing, thank you.
I think we had one more over there, yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering which, it doesn't matter if they are recent or not, but which projects have you seen that are the ones that, I don't know, impressed you the more or excited the more? It doesn't matter if they are like a, commercial or more like indie. I was wondering which projects do you have in mind?
Do you mean current games that are being developed or that have been announced, like just overall market info?
Yeah, overall, the best ideas, even if they are like conceptions or implemented in full.
So we haven't announced any games at Probably Monsters. I would love to tell you about what I'm working on, but I can't. But I'm going to answer your question in a different way, which is like, what are the, I guess like games or ideas that I was most excited about from games that I've worked on in the past? And I think probably this is going to be a very weird answer because I've worked on a lot of really cool titles, but Forza Horizon was probably my favorite. And that was just because conceptually it was like, how do we do something very different in the racing genre that is not Gran Turismo, is not Forza Motorsport, which was the other game that we had, but that fills the gap in between the years that Forza Motorsport is not shipping, right? And we wanted to not just build a different game, but then also find a partner to build that game completely. And that led to Playground Games, who has been building that game for, I think, 13, 14 years now. But also, I think it evolved a genre in and of itself. A lot of people, consider that game a racing game, but it's really like, in my mind, like a pop culture car simulator, right? Nobody plays that game for racing. They play it for riding around in their car, their first car that they had, and driving it in an open world. And the amount of people who love doing that and not racing, I love that. Because I always said, it's not a racing game. It's not a racing game. And people are like, no, it's a racing game. I'm like, no, it's not. So I think that kind of concept where you're taking something that exists in a genre already and moving it in a different direction to bring an audience to your game that would never play a Forza Motorsport or a Gran Turismo. I think that is really exciting when you can do something like that.
Yeah, sorry we can't say more about the games we're working on. We haven't announced them yet. Soon.
Yeah, so thank you. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay. Do we have time for one last question? Do we have someone that want to ask one last question? There you are.
Thank you. Hi. My question is, as a game developer, what are the bases you need to start in game developing, like an enterprise or like yours? Like, what are the bases or the knowledge you need?
more interested in my job or his? It's very different.
Yeah.
So my background is entirely in game production, right? So I was a producer for a very long time, and then transitioned slowly more into like the business side instead of the operations side of game production. So when I became an executive producer, that was basically my job, is being the CEO of a product, right? Being the CEO of a game, and less caring about like how it's being made and like why we're making it, and then how do we make it financially successful. How do you get there? It's funny, my nephew, Andres, he's actually Colombian. He asked me this question last Wednesday, and because he wants to do what I do. And I was like, well, it's taken me a long time to get here, and I think the best answer that I could give to someone who wants to do this is to focus in on game production, but not just necessarily focus on shipping a game and shipping the next game and shipping the next game as a producer and then becoming a senior producer and a lead and whatever. No. The best thing that you could do is diversify your career within the space of game production. So maybe ship a game, then maybe go and do operations in the studio that you're in. It just gives you a diverse set of skills and experiences that will make you a much better game producer and leader in the long term. So.
Yeah, I think it's never been easier to make a game. And you know, you can take classes, you can study in school to learn game design, programming, art, right? That's one thing. But when you're studying, when you're young, you have one thing that older people don't have, it's time. You have more time on your hands. And that has a tremendous amount of value. It's never been easier to start making a game. You can learn just about anything online, programming, game design, and start making games. So when you go and try to find a job in a first studio, not only will you have potentially a diploma, but you're going to have all these games that you can show. And they might be super simple. They might be a copy of something else. But you have one thing that others won't have, is you made the games. So just find a way to start making your own games, get started, and then follow your path that you prefer in those specializations.
One thing I wanted to add, I was just thinking about, because I do a lot of Latinx in gaming. They have these conexiones and cafecitos every year where you do mentorships, and I'm one of the mentors that always shows up there every year. And I tell people, don't think about like the destination. Like when people are like, I want to become an executive producer, I want to, you know, become a general manager or whatever, art director or something. I was like, never think about what the destination is. Think about what you want out of your next 2 to 3 years and focus only on doing that. And then when you're getting close to the end of that journey, then think about what you want to do the next 2 to 3 years after that. Because it may change, it may always change. And if you have the destination in mind from the beginning, then you're gonna force yourself down a path that you might not wanna do later on. And I'll tell you, I was telling Mark earlier today, he didn't know this about me, but my career started in software engineering. I hate software engineering. I don't like it, I suck. But that's what I did for the first 6, 7 years of my career. I was okay at it, but I realized like 4 years in that I did not want to do this for a career. And I'm like, all right, well, what can I do next? And getting into production was the logical thing because I cared a lot about people, progress, like overall like team health and happiness and how we actually move a project forward, right? So I was like, that is what I should go do. And then I pivoted to that, and luckily I never had to pivot again. But you know, at one point in time, I wanted to be an artist too. And if you think my coding skills are bad, like you should see my art skills.
All right, guys, I guess we're just about out of time. We went 1 minute over time. Thanks a lot, everybody. It was great chatting with you guys.